Chapter 7, sections 1 through 3. Completing the square, quadratic formula, and determining the nature of the roots. So if you got those three concepts down, you should be good. Now look at the instructions. It says solve by completing the square or using the quadratic formula. So I guess somebody could actually just do the quadratic formula for all these and call her good. But we're not going to do that because this is a review. Both skills are necessary in your future. This will have a lot to do with being able to graph parabolas, and this is just good to have in your back pocket. So got the quadratic formula here, but we are going to start with completing the square because remember when we learned it, we said, hey, the most important part of completing the square is your coefficient of your squared term needs to be a 1. And you see that's already set up for us. So we're going to go like this, subtract this from both sides. And what we're trying to do is actually discover, is this factorable? So really there's a third technique, and that is, can you factor it? Because if you can, go for it. It's the easiest thing to do. But are there two factors of -5 that add up to 2? -2? No. So here comes completing the square. So what we're going to do in this situation is we're going to take the x squared minus 2x, go like this, create a space, equals, and then you'd add 5 just to kick it over to the other side. And some people might say, well, why did you bring that over in the first place? And the answer is, because I think it's easiest to, you should take a shot at factoring it. That's my opinion. But, all right, now we're kind of set up for completing the square. Take half of this, half of that is -1, square it, put that answer right there, but you also got to put it over here to keep balance. Now, if you have completed the square properly, this should be what I call a perfect square trinomial, and that should factor into x minus 1, but we don't want it to look like that. We want it to look like this, x minus 1 squared equals 6. And now we're ready for the infamous bada boom, bada bing, do the right thing. So we get x minus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 6. So then we add 1, we get x is 1 plus or minus the square root of 6. And there's our two answers. Okay, for this one, let's go ahead and distribute this, and then we'll talk. So we get x squared equals -6x plus 2. Again, I'm going to try to complete the square because I see that that's a 1. We'll use quadratic formula on a couple of these down here. So again, because there's a possibility that this might factor, I'm going to set it all equal to 0. And I'm going to try to factor it. But I can see there's no two factors of -2 that add up to 6. So you may consider that a wasted move, but I just don't. X squared plus 6x plus blank equals 2 plus blank. So now I take half of this number, which is 3, square it, 9, but if I put a 9 there, I got to put a 9 there. This is a perfect square trinomial, and that would factor into x plus 3 times x plus 3, but I'm just going to write it like that. Save a little time and space, and then there's 11. Bada boom, bada bing, do the right thing. So I get x plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 11. Subtract 3 from both sides, and I'd get x equals -3 plus or minus the square root of 11. Now, the one thing I failed to see is this obvious instruction. It says find the sum of your answers. So one of my answers is 1 plus the square root of 6. One of them is 1 minus the square root of 6. If I add those two answers together, you can see that my square root of 6's are going to cancel. 1 plus 1 is 2. So that's why the answer provided for you is a 2. Same situation here. It says find the sum of your answers. Well, one of my answers is -3 plus the square root of 11. The other was -3 minus the square root of 11. And if I add those two answers together, again, the radicals disappear. -3 and -3 is -6. And that would be my answer for number 2. All right, number 3, we're not going to use this technique. We're not going to use that technique, and we're not even going to factor it. We're going to look at this and go, wait a minute, I can see that I can divide by 5. So I'm going to get x plus 7 squared equals 5. Now I'm set. This is very similar to completing the square. So bada boom, bada bing, do the right thing. X plus 7 equals plus or minus the square root of 5. Subtract 7, subtract 7. So I get x is negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 5. But it says find the sum of your answers. So negative 7 plus the square root of 5, negative 7 minus the square root of 5, add them together. The square roots will always cancel when you have this situation. Negative 7 is negative 14. There's my answer. So now let's actually start practicing quadratic formula. I'm going to distribute. 8x squared plus 6x equals negative 5. I'm going to add 5 to both sides. 8x squared plus 6x plus 5. Here's my A, here's my B, here's my C. Do not identify your A, B, or your C until you set it equal to 0. And now I'm going to plug it into the quadratic formula. So I got to take the opposite of whatever B is. So it'd be negative 6 plus or minus the square root of B squared, which is 36, minus 4 times A times C all over 2A, which is 16. So 8 times 5 is 40. 40 times 4 is 160. So we really have 36 minus 160, which is negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 124 all over 16. And you can see we got a negative under the square root, so it's our first time having imaginary numbers. I'm going to take the I out, so it's negative 6 plus or minus I squared of 124 all over 16. Now the square root of 124, believe it or not, 4 will go into that. So I got to go 4 and 31. So this is negative 6 plus or minus 2I square root of 31 all over 16. But as you can see, we can take a 2 out, take a 2 out, take a 2 out. So my final answer would be negative 3 plus or minus I squared root of 31 all over 8. And that's a weird looking answer, but there it is. Thankfully, they didn't ask us to find the sum of the answers. We're just going to leave it alone. All right, next one. Well, we got some foiling to do, so 6x squared plus 6x minus 2x minus 2 equals 3x. Well, hopefully you know we have to set this equal to 0, so let's just take care of it right now. So we get 6x squared. 6x minus 2x is 4x, minus 3x is just plus x, minus 2 equals 0. Now, we could spend some time factoring this, but we're supposed to be practicing quadratic formulas, so let's just do that. So there's my A, there's my B, there's my C. So negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2A, which is 2 times 6, which is 12. Well, a negative times a positive times a negative is going to give me a positive. 6 times 4 is 24, times 2 is 48, plus 1 is 49, so I get negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 49 all over 12. Well, think about this. Isn't that the same thing as negative 1 plus or minus 7 all over 12? So I need to look at this in bite-sized pieces. I need to first look at negative 1 plus 7 over 12. And then I need to look at negative 1 minus 7 all over 12. So, because that's what this really is. So what's negative 1 plus 7? 6. What's 6 twelfths? Well, that's 1/2. What's negative 1 minus 7? That's negative 8. What's negative 8 twelfths reduced to? Negative 2 thirds. And there's my two answers for that problem. Number 6, do we like fractions? No. A unanimous no. So we're going to get rid of the fractions by looking at this, looking at this. What's the number that they will both go into? 6. So we're going to distribute, distribute, distribute. 3 goes into 6 twice. 2 times x squared is 2x squared. Nothing cancels here, so it's minus 6x. And then equals 1/2 of 6 is 3. Again, I got to set this equal to 0. And because it's like this, we're just going to use quadratic formula again. And negative b, which would be 6, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 36 minus 4 times a times c, all over 2a, which is 4. So I'd get 6 plus or minus the square root of 36. 8 times 3 is 24, all over 4. 36 plus 24 is 60. Running out of space. We'll try to squeeze it in here. The square root of 60 is 4 and 15. So that'd be 6 plus or minus 2 square root of 15 all over 4. And I hope you can see that you can take a 2 out, take a 2 out, take a 2 out. I'm going to put my answer up here. 3 plus or minus 1 square root of 15 all over 2. There's my answer for number 6. Not a whole lot of space there. All right, number 7 is just going to give us some more practice. So again, hopefully you're getting into the habit of just understanding you got to set these equal to 0 before you get started. And the reason I have not been completing the square is because I like it when these are a 1. If these are a 1, it's easy to complete the square. There is a way you can complete the square, but because they're letting us choose whatever technique we want, just whatever works the easiest, and for sure quadratic formula. So in this case, b is negative 6. So the formula says to start, you take the opposite of whatever b is. And so we're going to start by going, all right, 6 plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a, which in this case would be 6. And so we get 6 plus or minus 4 times 3 is 12, times 1 is 12. These are negatives, so it'd be plus. 36 plus 12 would be 48, all over 6. Now the square root of 48 is 16 and 3, so that would really turn into 6 plus or minus 4 square root of 3 all over 6. Take a 2 out, take a 2 out, take a 2 out. So it'd be 3 plus or minus 2 square root of 3 all over 3. Done. All right. This is probably the last problem before this video ends, and we'll have to have a part 2. But I want you to look at number 8. What's jumping out at you? This is a 93618. You got to just be able to see these things to make your life easier. So this is really x squared equals 4x minus 2. Can you imagine stuffing that stuff into the quadratic formula? See, they're seeing if you're looking for these little tricks. You got to be on the hunt for them. So now I'm going to set it equal to 0. And I'd get x squared minus 4x plus 2 equals 0. Try to factor it. You can't. We might as well just complete the square on this one just to practice it some more. So we're going to kick that over. So we get x squared minus 4x plus blank equals negative 2 plus blank. Notice this is a 1, and that's why it triggered. Let's complete the square. So take half of negative 4. It's negative 2. Square it. It's 4. And if I put a 4 there, I got to put a 4 there. This is a perfect square trinomial. So that's x minus 2 squared equals 2. Now I go bada boom, bada bing, do the right thing. X minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 2. Add 2, add 2. X is 2 plus or minus square root of 2. Done.